Have you ever sat alone, maybe late at night, and felt like your thoughts were racing uncontrollably? Like your mind was pulling you in 100 different directions, reliving old mistakes, worrying about what's to come, or judging yourself for not being where you thought you'd be. It's almost as if you're a prisoner in your own mind, caught in a loop that you can't seem to break. Now imagine this: you're walking through a forest. The air is fresh, the sunlight filters through the trees, and all you hear are birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. You feel calm, connected, and alive. But then, out of nowhere, you stumble upon a tangled web of branches blocking your path. It's messy, overwhelming, and you don't know how to get through. That web is like your mind, complex, full of knots, but not impossible to navigate. What if I told you that there's a way to untangle that web? A way to walk through life with a clear mind and an open heart, no longer feeling trapped by your thoughts or emotions. That's what we're exploring today. A journey to escape the trap of your own mind, using timeless wisdom and practical steps to find peace within. Are you ready to take the first step? Part 1. Recognizing mental patterns. Imagine waking up one morning, and the first thing that greets you isn't the sunlight streaming through your window, but a barrage of thoughts. I have so much to do today. What if I mess up that presentation at work? Why did I say that to my friend yesterday? She probably thinks I'm so stupid. Before you've even had a chance to brush your teeth, you're already caught in a web of negativity. Sound familiar? That's the storyteller in your mind at work. Our minds are incredible at creating narratives, stories about who we are, what we're capable of, and how the world perceives us. But these stories often lean toward the negative, focusing on our flaws, failures, and fears. And the more these thoughts repeat, the more believable they become. A single mistake at work can spiral into a self-defeating mantra. I'm not smart enough. I'll never succeed. Over time, these narratives shape the way we see ourselves, even though they're not rooted in truth. This is where mindfulness comes in. Buddhism teaches that mindfulness, the simple act of being present and aware, is the first step to breaking free from these mental patterns. Think of your thoughts as a flowing river. Most of us spend our days submerged in the water, being swept away by its current. But mindfulness invites us to step onto the riverbank and watch the water flow. It's not about stopping the river or controlling its direction. It's about observing it without judgment, recognizing that the water is separate from you. Let's consider Oprah Winfrey's story. Despite her success, Oprah has openly shared her struggles with negative self-talk. Growing up in poverty, facing abuse, and navigating an industry that often undervalues Black women, she carried a deep sense of inadequacy. Her inner storyteller repeated a cruel narrative: "You're not enough." But through mindfulness and self-awareness, she learned to challenge these thoughts. She began to observe them as just that, thoughts. Instead of letting them define her, she saw them for what they were: fleeting, impermanent, and not reflective of her true worth. This shift allowed her to focus on her purpose and thrive, proving that our thoughts don't have to dictate our reality. The beauty of mindfulness is its accessibility. You don't need special tools or hours of free time to start practicing. Begin with just 5 minutes a day. Find a quiet place, sit comfortably, and close your eyes. As thoughts arise, notice them without judgment. Maybe you think about an email you forgot to send or replay a conversation where you said something awkward. Instead of getting pulled into these thoughts, simply acknowledge them and let them pass, like leaves floating down a stream. First, your mind will resist. It's used to being in control. But with practice, you'll develop a new kind of awareness, one that creates space between you and your thoughts. This practice might seem small, but its impact is profound. When you realize that your thoughts are not you, you begin to reclaim your power. No longer are you at the mercy of every worry or self-critical idea that crosses your mind. Instead, you become the observer, the one who chooses which thoughts to engage with and which to let go. Think about how often you replay certain thoughts in your mind: worries about the future, regrets about the past, or fears about how others perceive you. These mental loops feel automatic, almost like a default setting. But mindfulness is the reset button. It reminds you that you're not the stories your mind tells. You're the one witnessing the stories, and that makes all the difference. This shift in perspective can ripple into every area of your life. Let's say you're at work, and you make a mistake during a meeting. Your mind might immediately start crafting a narrative. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. I'm terrible at this job. But if you've cultivated mindfulness, you can pause and ask yourself, is this thought true? Or is it just my mind reacting out of fear? By stepping back, you give yourself the clarity to respond to the situation calmly, rather than spiraling into self-doubt. Mindfulness doesn't mean you'll never have negative thoughts again. They're a natural part of being human, but it does mean you'll have a tool to handle them with grace. Instead of getting caught in their current, you'll stand firmly on the riverbank, watching them flow by, and in that space between you and your thoughts, you'll find freedom. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when we identify with our thoughts, believing them to be absolute truths. But when we see them for what they truly are, temporary mental events, we can begin to let go of their grip. This isn't just a philosophical idea. It's a practical skill that can transform your daily life. Imagine waking up in the morning and, instead of being overwhelmed by your thoughts, you greet them with curiosity. There's that worry about the meeting today. I see you, but I'm not going to let you ruin my day. How liberating would that be? The river of thoughts will always flow. You can't stop it, nor should you try, but you don't have to be swept away by it. Through mindfulness, you can learn to observe the river, recognizing that while it's a part of your experience, it doesn't define who you are. And in that realization, you'll discover a profound sense of peace, a peace that comes not from silencing your mind, but from understanding it. Part 2. The illusion of self and letting go of the ego. Imagine a young artist, sitting alone in her studio, staring at a blank canvas. She's painted before, but something feels different today. Her mind is heavy with doubt. Am I really an artist? She wonders. What if people don't like what I create? What if I'm not good enough? Each question feels like a tiny stone, weighing her down. In that moment, her ego is speaking loudly, demanding proof of her worth. And until she satisfies it, she feels stuck, unable to pick up her brush. This is the trap of the ego. It's that inner voice that constantly asks, "Who am I?" and insists on defining the answer with labels. Successful, smart, failure, talented. The ego convinces us that we must constantly build, protect, and prove our identity. But the truth, as Buddhism teaches, is that this self, the one clinging to labels, is an illusion. Who we are is not fixed. It's fluid, evolving, interconnected with the ever-changing nature of life. Albert Einstein once offered a profound insight into this truth. He said, "A human being is part of the whole, called by us the universe." He experiences himself, his thoughts, and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. Einstein recognized that our individual identities are like drops of water in an ocean, unique in form but inseparable from the larger whole. Yet, the ego convinces us otherwise, making us feel isolated and defined by our differences. Let's think about what this means in daily life. Consider the way we attach ourselves to achievements or failures. When things are going well, when you're praised at work, or someone admires your talents, it feels amazing. The ego swells with pride, whispering, "See, you're special. You're better than others." But what happens when things go wrong? When you're criticized, overlooked, or make a mistake, the ego's voice shifts to shame. "You're worthless. You've failed. Everyone can see it." This constant fluctuation between pride and shame creates suffering because it ties your sense of self to things that are always changing. Buddhism teaches that clinging to a rigid identity, whether positive or negative, is like trying to hold onto water. The harder you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. True peace comes not from building or defending an identity, but from letting go of the need to define yourself at all. Think back to the artist in her studio. What if, instead of asking, "Am I good enough?" she simply allowed herself to create without judgment? What if she understood that her art wasn't about proving something to the world, but about expressing her connection to it? In that shift, she would free herself from the ego's demands, rediscovering the joy of creation. This is the heart of letting go of the ego, realizing that you don't have to prove your worth to anyone, not even to yourself. Your value doesn't come from external achievements or labels. It comes from the simple fact that you exist, that you're part of the greater whole, just as Einstein described. But letting go of the ego isn't easy. It takes mindfulness and self-awareness to notice when the ego is taking control. One way to start is by questioning the thoughts that arise when you feel hurt, angry, or defensive. For example, if someone criticizes your work and you find yourself thinking, "They don't understand me. I need to show them I'm right." Pause and ask yourself, who is this I that feels so attacked? What am I really trying to protect? Often, you'll find that it's the ego, clinging to its story of who you are. Another practice is to reflect on the impermanence of life. Everything that defines your ego, the job title, the possessions, the compliments, and even the criticisms will eventually fade away. This isn't meant to be depressing. It's liberating. When you recognize that nothing is permanent, you stop clinging so tightly to the things that inflate or deflate your sense of self. You begin to see yourself not as a collection of labels, but as a part of the ever-changing, interconnected flow of life. There's a beautiful story in Buddhism that illustrates this. A monk asked his teacher, "Master, who am I?" The teacher pointed to the sky and said, "You are like the clouds." Confused, the monk pressed further. "What do you mean?" The teacher smiled and explained, "The clouds form, change shape, and eventually disappear, but the sky remains. You are not the clouds. You are the sky." This metaphor reminds us that our thoughts, feelings, and identities are like clouds, temporary and ever-shifting, but beneath them lies the vast, unchanging sky of our true nature. When you let go of the ego, you create space for something deeper, connection. Instead of seeing yourself as separate from others, you begin to recognize the threads that bind us all. This shift can transform your relationships. Instead of competing, comparing, or judging, you approach others with empathy and compassion. You see that their struggles are your struggles, their joys are your joys. This sense of interconnectedness dissolves the walls the ego builds, allowing you to experience true peace. Letting go of the ego also opens the door to humility. Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. It's the freedom to act without constantly worrying about how others perceive you. Consider Einstein again. Despite his genius, he lived with a deep sense of humility, understanding that his brilliance was not solely his own but a reflection of the collective knowledge of humanity. This humility allowed him to contribute to the world without being consumed by his ego. The next time you feel the need to prove yourself, pause and take a breath. Ask yourself, am I acting from a place of ego or from a place of connection? You might find that the pressure to impress or defend yourself begins to fade. In its place, there's a quiet confidence, a knowing that you don't have to be anything other than who you are in this moment. Imagine living with that kind of freedom. Imagine walking through life without the constant weight of trying to measure up, without the fear of failure or the need for approval. This is what Buddhism offers. A path to let go of the illusion of self and discover the peace that comes from simply being. It's not about erasing your identity, but about loosening your grip on it, allowing you to flow with life instead of resisting it. And in that flow, you'll find a sense of freedom that no external label or achievement could ever give you. Part 3: Releasing Attachment and Desire. Imagine holding a delicate vase in your hands. It's beautiful, one of a kind, and you value it immensely. First, you cradle it gently, appreciating its beauty. But then a thought creeps in. What if I drop it? What if someone takes it? Instinctively, your grip tightens. You hold it so firmly that your fingers begin to ache. the joy of owning it overshadowed by the fear of losing it. This is attachment, a kind of mental and emotional clinging that, while rooted in love or desire, often brings us more pain than joy. In life, we cling to more than just physical objects. We attach ourselves to relationships, careers, dreams, and even ideas about who we are or how life should be. These attachments give us a sense of security, but they also set us up for inevitable suffering. Why? Because, as Buddhism reminds us, everything is impermanent. People change, situations evolve, and nothing stays the same. The tighter we hold on, the more it hurts when life's natural impermanence pulls these things away. There's a well-known story about a wealthy man who visited a Buddhist monk. Burdened with anxiety, he had accumulated great wealth, yet he lived in constant fear of losing it. The monk handed him a simple clay cup and said, "I drink from this cup every day, knowing it's already broken." The man was confused. The cup was perfectly intact. Why imagine it broken? The monk explained, "Because when the day comes that it cracks or shatters, I won't feel sorrow. I'll remember that I enjoyed it while it lasted, but I never believed it was mine to keep." This story captures the essence of releasing attachment. It doesn't mean we stop caring about the things or people we love. Instead, it's about holding them with open hands rather than clenched fists. It's about appreciating them fully, knowing they're not permanent fixtures in our lives. When we cling tightly, we create an illusion of control, as if we can prevent change. But life doesn't work that way. The vase will one day break, just as relationships end. Jobs change, and even our own bodies age. Think about a time when you experienced loss, maybe the end of a relationship or a job you loved. The pain often comes not just from the loss itself, but from the expectations tied to it. You might have thought, "This was supposed to last forever. I don't know who I am without it." But these expectations are rooted in attachment, in the belief that our happiness depends on things staying the same. Buddhism teaches that true freedom comes when we loosen our grip on these attachments. This doesn't mean we should reject relationships, ambition, or meaningful goals. It means we approach them with a mindset of appreciation rather than possession. When we accept the impermanence of all things, we stop clinging to what is temporary and start finding peace in the present moment. Consider the concept of desire, which often fuels attachment. Desire itself isn't inherently bad. It's natural to want things, to dream, and to strive. The problem arises when desire turns into craving, a relentless longing that says, "I won't be happy until I have this." Think of it like chasing a horizon. No matter how far you run, the horizon keeps moving, always just out of reach. The more you chase, the more exhausted you become, never realizing that peace isn't found in getting somewhere. It's found in being right where you are. Take a simple example, wanting a new car. You imagine the excitement of driving it, the way people will admire you, the satisfaction of having something shiny and new. So, you work hard, save up, and finally buy it. At first, feels amazing, but over time, the thrill fades. The car becomes just another thing you own. And soon, a newer model catches your eye. This cycle of desire and disillusionment keeps us trapped, always reaching for the next thing, never satisfied. Buddhism offers a way out of this cycle. It teaches us to recognize desire for what it is, a mental habit, not a reflection of our true needs. Instead of letting desire control us, we can observe it with curiosity. When you feel yourself longing for something, pause and ask, "What am I really seeking? Is this desire about the thing itself? Or is it about the feeling I think it will bring?" Often, you'll find that what you truly want isn't the object or outcome, but a sense of happiness, security, or worthiness. And here's the irony. Those feelings don't come from external things, they come from within. Letting go of attachment doesn't mean living without joy or ambition. It means finding joy and purpose in a way that isn't tied to outcomes. Imagine a musician playing their instrument, not to impress an audience or win an award, but simply for the love of the music. In that moment, they're free from the pressure to succeed, free from the fear of failure, fully immersed in the present. This perspective can transform how we approach relationships as well. When we cling to people, expecting them to fulfill all our needs or never change, we place an impossible burden on them. But when we love without attachment, we create space for authenticity and growth. We can appreciate our loved ones for who they are, rather than who we want them to be. There's a story of a monk who carried a small plant with him wherever he went. He watered it daily, enjoying its beauty and the quiet ritual of caring for it. One day, during his travels, the plant wilted and died. A fellow traveler asked if he was sad. The monk replied, "I loved the plant while it lived, but I never believed it was mine to keep. Its life and its end are both part of the same beauty." This mindset of loving without clinging is one we can cultivate through mindfulness. Start by noticing the things you're attached to. Maybe it's a relationship, a goal, or even a certain way of being seen by others. Ask yourself, what would happen if this changed or disappeared? Would I still be okay? This isn't about anticipating loss or living in fear. It's about preparing your heart to embrace life's impermanence with grace. Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It's a practice, one that requires patience and compassion for yourself. You might start with small steps, like releasing the need for things to go perfectly at work or letting go of a minor grudge. Over time, you'll find that the more you let go, the lighter you feel. It's like setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying for miles. You didn't realize how much it was weighing you down until it was gone. Buddhism reminds us that freedom isn't about having everything we want. It's about wanting less. It's about realizing that our true happiness doesn't depend on holding onto what's temporary, but on connecting with the deeper, unchanging essence of who we are. When we release attachment, we open ourselves to a life of greater peace, gratitude, and presence. And in that space, we discover that we were never truly empty or incomplete. Everything we needed was already within us. Part 4. Facing fear with awareness. Fear often feels like a shadow that grows larger the more we avoid it. It thrives on the unknown, on the stories we tell ourselves about what might happen. We imagine worst-case scenarios, replaying them in our minds until they seem inevitable. But here's the truth. Most fears are not rooted in reality. They're projections, illusions created by the mind, and they lose their power when we confront them with awareness. Think about a moment in your life when fear held you back. Maybe it was the fear of speaking in front of a crowd, starting a new job, or even having a difficult conversation with someone you care about. In those moments, your mind likely conjured up all kinds of what-ifs. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if this ruins everything? The fear felt overwhelming, almost paralyzing. But if you look back now, you might realize that the reality was far less terrifying than your imagination had made it out to be. Steve Jobs, a visionary who shaped the modern world, faced one of his greatest fears early in his career. Imagine creating something as groundbreaking as Apple, pouring your heart and soul into building it from the ground up, only to be fired from your own company. For Jobs, this was more than a professional setback. It was a personal failure. He had tied so much of his identity to Apple that losing it felt like losing himself. But instead of letting fear paralyze him, he chose to face it head-on. He reflected, regrouped, and channeled his energy into new ventures, founding Next and Pixar. Years later, he returned to Apple, stronger and more creative than ever, leading the company to produce some of its most iconic innovations. Jobs' story reminds us that fear, while intimidating, can also be a gateway to growth. When we stop running from it and instead face it with curiosity, we discover that it's not as all-powerful as it seems. Buddhism teaches this principle beautifully. Fear exists in the mind, and it feeds on our attachment to control. When we let go of the need to control every outcome, we create space to observe fear without being consumed by it. Imagine fear as a wild animal. If you turn and run, chases you, its power growing with every step. But if you stop, stand your ground, and look it in the eye. You begin to see it for what it is, an instinct, not an undefeatable force. This is the essence of mindfulness, pausing to observe your emotions, rather than reacting to them impulsively. When fear arises, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this fear based on reality, or is it a story I'm creating? Often, you'll realize that the fear has little to do with the present moment and everything to do with imagined scenarios. Consider the Buddhist concept of impermanence. Just as everything in life changes, so do our emotions. Fear, no matter how intense, is not permanent, comes and goes like waves on the shore. When you understand this, you stop clinging to fear as if it defines your reality. Instead, you learn to ride the wave, knowing it will eventually recede. There's a story about a monk who encountered a tiger while walking through the forest. Most of us, faced with such a situation, would panic, running or freezing in terror. But the monk didn't react. Instead, he sat down and meditated, fully accepting the reality of the moment. He understood that fear wouldn't change the tiger's actions. It would only cloud his mind. By staying present and calm, he embodied the ultimate truth of facing fear. We cannot control the external world, but we can choose how we respond to it. The tiger, uninterested in the monk's stillness, eventually walked away. This story illustrates the power of detachment from fear. When we stop feeding it with our energy, fear loses its hold over us. But how do we practice this in everyday life? When the tigers we face are less literal but no less intimidating. The answer lies in mindfulness. The next time you feel fear rising, pause. Don't try to push it away or distract yourself. Instead, take a moment to observe it. Where do you feel it in your body? Is your chest tight? Your stomach in knots? What thoughts are accompanying the fear? Write them down if it helps. And then ask yourself, are these thoughts based on facts, or are they assumptions? This simple exercise creates a gap between you and your fear, allowing you to see it clearly rather than being swept away by it. Mindfulness also teaches us to stay anchored in the present. Most fears are rooted in the future, things that haven't happened yet and may never happen at all. When your mind starts spinning what-if scenarios, gently bring yourself back to the now. Focus on your breath, the sensation of your feet on the ground, or the sounds around you. In this moment, ask yourself, is there anything to fear right now? More often than not, you'll find that the answer is no. Fear can also be a teacher if we're willing to listen. It often points to areas where we're resisting change or clinging to comfort. For example, the fear of failure might reveal an attachment to perfection, while the fear of rejection might highlight a desire for validation. By examining these underlying attachments, we can begin to release them, freeing ourselves from fear's grip. In relationships, fear often manifests as a fear of loss or vulnerability. We hesitate to express our true feelings because we're afraid of being hurt. But when we approach fear with awareness, we see that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It's an opportunity to deepen connection, both with ourselves and others. Facing fear in this way requires courage, but it also fosters growth. Imagine what life would look like if you stopped letting fear dictate your choices. How many opportunities have you avoided because you were afraid of failing? How many relationships have suffered because you were too scared to speak your truth? Facing fear doesn't mean recklessly charging into danger. It means approaching life with an open heart, willing to embrace uncertainty and trust in your own resilience. Buddhism teaches that freedom from fear comes not from eliminating it, but from changing our relationship with it. Fear will always arise. It's a natural part of being human. But when we meet it with mindfulness and compassion, we transform it from an enemy into an ally. We see it for what it is, a fleeting emotion, not a permanent state. And in that recognition, we find freedom. The next time fear knocks at your door, greet it with curiosity instead of resistance. Invite it in, listen to what it has to say, and then let it go. You'll discover that fear, like all emotions, is just passing through. It doesn't define you. And when you face it with awareness, you open yourself to a world of possibilities that fear once kept hidden. In that moment, you step into the fullness of life, free, courageous, and present. Part 5. Embracing the present moment. Picture this: you're sitting in your car at a red light. Your mind racing. You're replaying an awkward conversation from earlier, cringing at the words you wish you'd said differently. At the same time, you're worrying about tomorrow's presentation, imagining every way it could go wrong. The light turns green, but you barely notice. You're so caught up in the past and the future that you're missing the one place where life is actually happening. Right now, this is the paradox of modern life. We're surrounded by moments, each brimming with richness and possibility, yet we so often overlook them. Instead, we dwell on the past, wishing we could change what's already done, or fixate on the future, trying to prepare for what may never happen. But the present moment, the only moment that truly exists, is right here, waiting for us to notice it. Think about how often you've rushed through your day on autopilot. You might have eaten breakfast without really tasting it, walked outside without noticing the sky, or listened to a loved one without truly hearing them. It's as if we're sleepwalking through life, so preoccupied with our thoughts that we miss the beauty unfolding around us. And yet, Buddhism teaches that the present moment is where everything happens. It's where peace resides, where joy is found, and where we can truly connect with ourselves and the world. Imagine a small child playing in a park. They're not worried about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. They're fully immersed in the now, laughing as they chase bubbles, marveling at a butterfly, feeling the grass beneath their hands. This kind of presence isn't something we lose as we grow older. We simply forget how to access it. Mindfulness is the practice that helps us remember. A simple way to reconnect with the present moment is to go for a walk. Leave your phone behind and just pay attention to your surroundings. Notice the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze, the rhythm of your footsteps, the warmth of the sun on your skin. Feel the ground beneath your feet, steady and supportive. These are small things, but they anchor you in the now, pulling you out of the endless chatter of your mind. There's a well-known Zen story about a man being chased by a tiger. In his desperation to escape, he clings to a vine dangling over the edge of a cliff. Below him, another tiger waits, ready to pounce. As he hangs there, he notices a wild strawberry growing nearby. Instead of panicking, he reaches out, plucks the strawberry, and eats it. The sweetness fills him with joy. The story reminds us that even in life's most challenging moments, there are opportunities to savor the present, if we're willing to let go of fear and truly see what's in front of us. When you practice mindfulness, you start to notice things that once seemed mundane. The way light filters through your window in the morning, the sound of rain tapping on the roof, the feeling of warm water on your hands as you wash dishes. These small moments, when fully experienced, are profound. They remind you that life isn't happening somewhere else. It's happening right here, in these ordinary yet extraordinary details. Buddhism often compares the mind to a restless monkey, constantly jumping from branch to branch. It swings between the past and the future, rarely settling in the present. But mindfulness helps us tame the monkey mind, teaches us to sit still, to breathe, and to be. When you focus on the present, you create a sense of spaciousness, a break from the mental loops that keep you trapped in regret or worry. You might wonder, what about the problems I need to solve? The goals I'm striving for? Don't I need to think about the future? Of course, planning and reflection have their place. But there's a difference between intentionally preparing for what's ahead and obsessively worrying about it. When you're grounded in the present, you can approach challenges with clarity and calm, instead of letting anxiety cloud your judgment. One powerful aspect of mindfulness is its ability to shift your perspective. Let's say you're stuck in traffic. Normally, you might feel frustrated, thinking about the time you're wasting or the things you need to do. But what if, instead, you used that time to simply be present? You could notice the way sunlight reflects off car windows, listen to a favorite song on the radio, or take a few deep breaths. Suddenly, the experience transforms from an annoyance into an opportunity for peace. This shift isn't about ignoring life's difficulties. It's about facing them with a sense of presence and acceptance. When you live in the present, you realize that you don't have to fix everything or figure it all out at once. The future will come in its own time, and the past is already gone. All you need to do is handle what's in front of you, one moment at a time. There's a beautiful simplicity in this approach. You don't have to wait for the perfect circumstances to find happiness or peace. You don't need to achieve more, earn more, or be more. Everything you need is already here, in the present moment. This is the essence of Buddhist teachings. Freedom is not something you achieve. It's something you discover by fully inhabiting your life as it is. Imagine waking up tomorrow and deciding to approach your day with mindfulness. Instead of rushing through your morning routine, you take a moment to enjoy the aroma of your coffee or the warmth of your shower. On your commute, you notice the changing colors of the trees or the rhythm of people walking by. During a conversation, you truly listen, giving the other person your full attention. These small changes might seem insignificant, but they have a cumulative effect. They bring you closer to yourself, to others, and to the present moment. Thich Nhat Hanh, a renowned Buddhist teacher, once said, "Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the world revolves slowly, evenly, without rushing toward the future." This simple act of drinking tea becomes a metaphor for living mindfully. It's not about the tea. It's about the presence you bring to the act of drinking it. Over time, this practice of mindfulness can transform the way you experience life. You begin to see that the present moment is enough. It doesn't need to be perfect or extraordinary to be worthy of your attention. By embracing the now, you free yourself from the burden of constantly chasing something more. You realize that life isn't something to get through. It's something to be lived, fully and deeply, one moment at a time. In those moments of presence, you'll find a sense of peace that isn't dependent on external circumstances. Whether you're facing a challenge, celebrating a joy, or simply sitting quietly, you'll know that this moment, right here, right now, is exactly where you're meant to be. And in that realization, you'll discover a kind of freedom that nothing else can give you. Part 6. The Transformative Power of Compassion. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You catch a glimpse of yourself and, almost reflexively, you start to critique. Why do I look so tired? Why didn't I handle that situation better? I'm so behind on everything. These thoughts spiral quickly, and before you know it, you're carrying the weight of self-judgment for the rest of the day. But now, pause. What if, instead of criticism, you looked at yourself with kindness? What if you said, "I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough right now"? How would that shift the way you feel? Compassion often begins with how we treat others. But the truth is, it has to start with how we treat ourselves. We're taught to be kind to our friends, to forgive their mistakes and cheer them on when they struggle. Yet when it comes to our own missteps, we're relentless. We hold ourselves to impossible standards, replaying every error, every awkward moment, as if perfection were the only acceptable outcome. Buddhism teaches that this kind of self-criticism is not only unkind but unnecessary. To live fully, we must first learn to extend compassion inward. The Dalai Lama once said, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." This wisdom reminds us that compassion is not just a gift we give to others. It's also a healing force for ourselves. When you allow yourself to let go of judgment and embrace kindness, you create space for growth and peace. Consider the story of a young boy learning to play the piano. He makes mistakes constantly, fumbling through notes, growing frustrated with himself. Each time he stumbles, his teacher smiles gently and says, "That's okay. Mistakes mean you're learning." Encouraged by this kindness, the boy relaxes, plays with more confidence, and slowly improves. Now imagine if the teacher had scolded him for every wrong note. The boy might have given up entirely. too afraid of failure to try again. This same principle applies to how we treat ourselves. When you approach your flaws with understanding instead of criticism, you give yourself the freedom to try, to learn, and to grow. Mistakes are inevitable, but they don't define you. They're simply part of being human. The ripple effect of self-compassion doesn't stop with you. When you're kinder to yourself, you become more patient and understanding with others. Think about the last time you were irritable with someone, maybe a coworker, a family member, or a stranger. Often, our frustration with others stems from the frustration we feel toward ourselves. But when you're at peace within, it's easier to extend that peace outward. Imagine standing in line at a coffee shop, and the barista gets your order wrong. On a day when you're already feeling harsh toward yourself, this small mistake might set you off. Why can't anyone get things right? But on a day when you've practiced self-compassion, you're more likely to respond with grace. No problem. Take your time. That small act of patience might be exactly what that barista needs to brighten their day. Compassion creates connection, turning everyday encounters into moments of kindness. Compassion also has the power to bridge divides, even in the most challenging relationships. Think of someone who's hurt you, someone whose actions you struggle to forgive. It's tempting to hold on to anger, to build a wall between you and them. But Buddhism teaches that holding on to resentment only deepens our own suffering. Compassion doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means understanding that the other person, like you, is human, navigating their own pain and struggles. When you see their humanity, forgiveness becomes possible, and the weight of anger lifts from your shoulders. Take, for example, the story of a Buddhist monk who spent years imprisoned and tortured. When he was finally released, he was asked how he survived such unimaginable suffering. His response was simple yet profound. "I was most afraid of losing my compassion for those who imprisoned me." This monk understood that even in the face of cruelty, compassion was his greatest source of strength. By refusing to let hatred consume him, he found a freedom that no external circumstances could take away. Practicing compassion doesn't require grand gestures. It can begin with the smallest actions, offering a smile to a stranger, holding the door for someone, or simply listening without interrupting when someone needs to talk. These acts may seem insignificant, but they create ripples. Imagine how many lives could be touched if everyone made just one kind gesture a day. Compassion is contagious. It inspires others to pay kindness forward, creating a cycle of goodwill that transforms communities. And don't forget to turn this same kindness inward. Start your day with a moment of self-compassion. When you wake up, instead of diving into your to-do list or replaying yesterday's mistakes, take a deep breath and say something kind to yourself. Could be as simple as, "I'm doing my best," or "Today is a new opportunity." Throughout the day, whenever self-critical thoughts arise, pause and reframe them. If you wouldn't say it to a friend, don't say it to yourself. Practicing self-compassion also means recognizing your limits and giving yourself permission to rest. In a culture that glorifies busyness, it's easy to feel guilty for taking a break. But rest is not laziness, it's an act of self-care. Imagine a friend who's exhausted and overwhelmed. Would you tell them to push through, or would you encourage them to take time for themselves? Offer yourself that same grace. Compassion isn't always easy, especially when life feels overwhelming. But it's in those moments when you're tired, frustrated, or hurting that compassion is most transformative. It's a reminder that you don't have to face life's challenges alone or perfectly. You're allowed to lean on others, to forgive yourself, and to move forward with kindness. As you embrace compassion, you'll begin to notice its profound effects on your own heart. The weight of self-judgment will lift, replaced by a sense of lightness and peace. You'll find it easier to connect with others, not from a place of obligation but from genuine care. And perhaps most importantly, you'll realize that compassion is not a weakness. It's a strength, a quiet courage that transforms both the giver and the receiver. Buddhism teaches that the seeds of compassion are already within us, waiting to be nurtured. By watering these seeds through small acts of kindness, forgiveness, and understanding, we cultivate a life rooted in connection and love. Compassion isn't something you have to earn or achieve. It's something you choose, moment by moment, and in choosing compassion, you discover not only how to heal others, but how to heal yourself. As we come to the end of this conversation, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect on what we've explored together. The thoughts that run through your mind, the fears that hold you back, the stories you tell yourself, they are not the truth. They are not who you are. They are simply patterns, like clouds drifting across the sky. And just as clouds pass, so too can your worries, doubts, and fears if you let them. You've seen how awareness can help you step back from the chaos, how letting go of attachments can bring relief, and how embracing compassion, both for yourself and others, can transform the way you live and love. These are not just abstract ideas. They are tools you can use every single day to create a life of clarity, peace, and freedom. But remember, this isn't about achieving perfection or silencing your mind forever. It's about learning to live with your thoughts, not being controlled by them. It's about finding small moments of mindfulness in the middle of a busy day, about forgiving yourself when you fall short, and about showing up for life, fully present and fully alive. So here's my question for you as we part ways. What's one thought, one worry, or one belief you're ready to let go of today? What's one small step you can take to free yourself from the trap of your mind? You don't need to have all the answers right now. Just start with this moment, this breath. And as you move forward, remember, freedom isn't something you find. It's something you create. One moment of awareness, one act of kindness, one step at a time. You've got this, and I'll be right here, walking alongside you on this journey. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings. Together, we can keep exploring, learning, and growing. Until next time, may you find peace in every moment and freedom in every breath. You are enough, just as you are. Keep going.